Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. My name is Marjorie Bissett, and I'm chairing this meeting. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded, and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street, opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So we begin with item 1, which is the appointment of substitutes. Julian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have quite a few, so please bear with me. So we have, Shafaz Ditter is here for Mark Bayliss. Ala Ditter is here for James Stanley. Stephen Hodgson for Andy Stafford. Tom Petrosky for Louis Stephen. And lastly, Robin Norfolk for Pat Agar.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any interest to declare? Yes, Chris.
Yeah, Chair, I've had discussions with the owner of DB Boxing, and that's got some relation to the paper that comes up at agenda item 10, I think it is. So, but made no decisions with him, just had me down to see the gym.
Similarly, Chair, I've had discussions with John, and also I was privileged to open the gym, and it's all in the public domain, so I know of him. When I saw him, so I thought, I saw the agenda, so I better declare it. I've been told not to, but I thought I'd better get on the...
Good evening, councillors. My name is Jonathan Shaw and I run a local boxing club. DP Boxing is a community-based club that hosts boxing classes for boys, girls, men and women from 4 years old up. It is a fully inclusive club that has students of all abilities, all of which have their own specific reasons why they attend. Some want to get fit, some want to improve their mental health, and some want to compete on boxing shows both locally and nationally. Our club is the largest in the city when talking about the amount of students that attend. A typical 10 to 15-year-old boxing class will have over 30 students in each session, 3 times a week in, week out, without fail. We also provide platforms for our students to compete on professionally managed boxing events. When standing and speaking to you all today, or sitting rather, it is important to highlight that I believe we all share the same agenda. That agenda is safety. At the forefront of everything we do at both the club and our boxing shows, safety comes 1, 2 and 3 on our list of priorities. With this said, we are affiliated with Inspire Championship Boxing, otherwise known as ICB. This organisation has been around for 20 years. On average, they are involved in organising and affiliating 6 boxing events every weekend throughout the whole of the year. Some of these events have been hosted in arenas such as Derby Arena and Nottingham Motorpoint Arena that has a maximum capacity of 20,000. In this time, they have never had any issues or any blemishes, hence the reason why they continue to successfully host boxing events throughout the company. This is the very reason we are affiliated with them. They are well known to be the best in the business at this level of boxing. They also host events internationally in Malta and Spain, with a current event being scheduled in Dubai later this year. This organisation is established and proven with a very good track record. The policies, insurances and requirements we have to adhere to through ICB are strict yet clear, with boxer and spectator safety at the forefront of all the planning and managing of these events. The tragic incident that happened on April the 22nd was hosted by a white-collar boxing platform. It is very important to stress that what they do and what we do are worlds apart on every level of the sport, including the managing of the event. In actual fact, I have been a campaigner against ultra white-collar boxing events and recently appeared on BBC Radio to discuss the reasons why. We have hosted ourselves 2 shows in Worcester last year, one of which was at the Purdue Leisure Centre. Both of these shows went amazingly well without a single issue. In actual fact, the deputy manager of Purdue told me in person that she thought it was the best run boxing event she had ever seen hosted at the venue. This is testament to the meticulous planning that goes on behind the scenes. Our competitors on the showers are trained and by qualified and experienced coaches that ensure they are competent and ready to compete. This training is done over months and in some instances even years. We only have competitors that are ready to compete on our showers. This is extremely important when discussing the safety of boxing events. We have the best referees, officials and medical staff that money can buy. They are all highly trained in their respective fields. I feel very, very confident when saying we have the best team possible. I would not sit here before you today and put my name to something if I wasn't 100% assured in the accuracy of what I was saying. I have been involved in boxing for 25 years, so I can speak from experience. I am also an active anti-knife crime campaigner. I have an hand-on approach in removing children from harmful and unproductive situations and giving them opportunities to better themselves and the spotlight to showcase their productive talents. We have many success and turnaround stories at our club. Our youth platform alone offers something special to our community, putting teenage boys and girls in structured, organised and positive settings and giving them all the opportunity to shine. A majority of our students all come with the express desire to compete on these locally hosted boxing events. I fear if we run the risk of losing a lot of the students will have worked tirelessly to keep on a positive path. Should you indicate these events not worthy, it will be a sad day for both boxing and I believe for Worcester. At the beginning, I mentioned that the safety comes first, second and third on our list of priorities within our organisation. So let's all work together on this. Let's grow safe boxing participation in this city as a team. Councillors, I implore you to consider all proposals on hosting semi-professional boxing events on an individual basis. We cannot be bracketed in the same way as other organisations who I will agree have gone a long way in damaging the reputation of boxing, but we are not them. The shows we have provided and the shows we continue to provide in the future have a long-lasting and positive effect on everyone involved within them. I welcome any questions and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much for coming and speaking. We will be discussing this item later on, and you're very welcome to stay. Thank you. Yes, please. Oh, is that? No. No. But we will be debating it later. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the minutes of the last meeting. Agenda item 4. I'm just going to run through them quickly. Let me know if you have any comments or changes. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8. And then there's also the minutes of the Policy and Resources Committee on the 28th of February. Following that, page 9 and page 10. So can we take those minutes as read? Agenda item 5 is the minutes of the Income Management Subcommittee on the 1st of February 2023. So continuing, page 11, 12, 13, and 14. So can we agree that, can we take those as read? And agenda item 6 is a progress report on the implementation of the Elections Act 2022. And Claire is going to speak on this.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation of the report in front of you is for the committee to note the progress made to date on the new requirements and the measures that have been taken and continue to be taken by the returning officer to implement the voter ID and accessibility provisions of the Elections Act. At its meeting on the 14th of December, the Personnel and General Purposes Subcommittee received a report of the progress to date, and it was agreed at that committee that a further report would be given to Personnel and General Purposes Committee. It was decided to, in order to give the progress a wider airing, to report the progress made to Policy and Resources Committee this evening. What I will do, and you'll see in section 4 of the report, there is quite a detailed progress plan of all the specific measures that have been put in place to support the introduction of voter ID and voter accessibility. What I will do is I won't go into detail on all of these items, but I will give you an update on the various items where further progress has been made since the compilation and publishing of this report. You'll note in section 4, I think one of the most important aspects to note is that the delivery of the elections is a corporate project, and the electoral services team and the returning officer is heavily reliant on other services within the council. So it's very much a cross-party delivery plan. Section 5 talks about voter engagement and the work that has been carried out to date to engage with communities to ensure as much as possible that communities across Worcester are aware of the new requirements and what that means to them and what they can expect on election day in the polling stations. You'll see there the progress to date, several media posts, paid promotional posts in the local media. An article on voter ID has been published in the March edition of City Life. Council web pages are being continually updated. The Electoral Commission has produced various posters and leaflets, both in large print and different languages, which have been distributed to community venues across the city. You'll have probably noticed pull-up banners. There's one just outside the courtroom door here. Customer services and within the community, promotional messages in bus shelters. Members of staff are continually encouraged to raise awareness within their own social networks, between their family and friends, as discussion points. And hopefully you'll have noticed with this year's council tax bill, there was a fairly large article that was included in there, which of course goes to every household. Additional work that is planned for later on in March and April. We're being supported by the community engagement team to deliver and post leaflets and flyers within community hubs across the city. The social media campaign will continue at a more heavier pace towards the run-up of the elections. Increased social and media campaign. And what we've also planned here in the Guildhall is we will set up a mock polling station operate on the day. So this will be with presiding officers, poll clerks, asking for voter ID, so you can see in practice exactly what that means to both the staff and voters coming to vote. This week, we've also entered into an arrangement to have pictures posted on the side of some of our refuse vehicles. So you will see in the next coming weeks quite big advertisements on our refuse vehicles. Member engagement, you'll know yourself from the weekly items that I produce. We are compiling weekly updates of all the various activities that we're undertaking. The Voter Authority Certificate Service, which we are offering here at the Guildhall from the Customer Services Centre. This service is for people that don't have the appropriate method of voter ID. To date, we have processed 120 applications, so slightly up at the time when this report was compiled, we were up to 90 applications. We've received some very positive feedback and compliments from members of the public on our process, how quick and efficient it is. So that was really positive to receive that feedback. And we now have additional staff employed to support with processing those applications. In terms of the equipment, the new equipment that will be available on polling day at polling stations, privacy screens have been purchased for all polling stations, so we're treating all polling stations the same, regardless if there is a private area within those polling stations. We've also purchased voter equipment to ensure that we provide the requirements that we need to do for voter accessibility, and these are items such as additional waiting chairs for companions to voters, magnifiers, tactile voting devices, wheelchair accessible booths, staff ID badges, larger staff ID badges, pencil grips, ramps, temporary doorbells, additional lighting for some of our polling stations where the lighting isn't as good as others, particularly in our temporary polling stations such as marquees, and reserved parking spaces where possible. In terms of staff resources and how we're going to manage the poll on the day, each polling station will have additional poll clerks, which will be signposting voters when they're coming, answering any questions, talking to voters about the new requirements and ensuring that voters have got the appropriate ID ready to show to presiding officers on duty. We're also employing additional polling station inspectors. Our station inspectors are what we call our eyes and ears on the ground on the day. So they'll be troubleshooting throughout the day if presiding officers do need any additional support to come and talk to voters. Those additional inspectors that are being employed are also senior female staff. So we will have increased female staff should voters require female support on the day. Polling station training, our polling station training provider, we have signed off an agreement today. So all presiding officer training and other election staff training will in fact be provided by the Electoral Commission. So it's very high quality training, which will start to take place in the next few weeks. You'll see there in item 12 that both myself, Shane, and all of the election team have been undertaking continuous training on the new requirements, which is ongoing. And you'll see there in section 5 of the report, briefly gives an update on the financial grants that we've received from central government and the monies that have been made available to help the City Council implement all of the new measures in order to ensure that we're ready on polling day. So that's a brief summary of the progress today. Happy to take any questions or provide any further information if anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much, Claire. Can I say how impressed I am by the thoroughness of your preparations? And it's great that we're doing so much more to help people with disabilities to vote. And I think that was something that we didn't do before. So I have Lucy.
Will you be, I notice you're going into various community centres and that sort of thing. could I perhaps ask if you could come up to Warndon Villages at all, whether it's in Tesco, whether it's in edge of Tesco's or Warndon or Lippard Centre, but there's sort of 8,000 electors up there. So it would be good if you could come somewhere. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hodgson. In response to that, very, very good suggestion. We have to date visited Dines Green Centre, the University, Purdiswell Sports Centre, the Horizon Centre, and what we've tried to do is target particular groups within those venues. But I think actually visiting a supermarket where there are a lot of people at any one time is an excellent idea, and yes, happy to consider that and see what we can do. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. I would also like to echo Lucy's comments and thank officers for all their hard work, and it's really diligent, very thorough, and I really appreciate that. I just think it's really sad. I looked at the BBC website, and just a month ago today, the government, we were told the government have sort of ignored calls to pause voter ID plans. And new figures reveal only 1% of those without valid documentation have signed up. And when we look at the number of people who have contacted in Worcester, it is a very tiny proportion. So I think we will see quite a sad low turnout in this year's elections, just to comment. But a huge thank you to officers. You're doing a super job.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I bet you thought about them already, but just in case. At point 5, you talked about putting banners up at the Guildhall forecourt and community engagement by using the community hubs and such like. I'm just wondering about posters outside the actual permanent polling stations in advance. Just suggesting, because they're places that people frequent anyway on most occasions. So that was one thing. And the other thing, in relation to sort of getting it right, I mean, I know the amount of work that you've done in putting into this, but I bet there's still people that will turn up at the elections without identification. And it might be worth, just getting numbers on that so that we know what we're up against next time.
Yes. Lynn.
Thank you. And that was going to be one of my questions, is actually, do the government require any data feedback on this? Is there a sort of a statutory obligation? And yes, number of people turned away on polling day, and the reason that they weren't, I think, is really important information, certainly for us locally, whether the government want it or not. And I think some kind of a post-election review of how did it work, how was it for us, and whether turnout is how it compares to previous years. I think that's all information that would be really useful. Welcome the improvements in disability access. There are one or two good things within the Act. Thank you for sharing actually the list of things in the Act. There are some things there that aren't necessarily coming into place this year, which are of further concern. I don't know whether many people realise, changing the voting system for mayoral and PCC elections to first past the post, when that was the one bit of proportional representation that we did have in the system. One other question that I was in fact asked today and didn't know the answer is virtual photo ID acceptable? So people who have, a photo ID on their phone, or has it got to be a physical passport? So well, the question actually was around the student ID, because that is, I think, is sufficiently rigorous to meet the criteria that it is legitimate ID. Will it be acceptable on the phone?
you want to reply to some of those?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. Councillor McKay's questions regarding posters and literature outside polling stations. Yes, of course, that's certainly something that we can look at. There will be posters and literature on polling day, but we can certainly look at having that available beforehand. Councillor Denham, in terms of feedback that we're required to give to the government after, this is the first year for everybody, and the government will be collecting statistics across the country in terms of how many people had to go back home and collect ID, how many people couldn't vote because they didn't have appropriate ID. So there will be that monitoring and review exercise carried out by the government, and we will be required to capture that detail on every polling station. And in terms of voter ID, for this year, no, it does have to be a hard copy ID document. I do think that's probably something that the government will look at in future years, whether they can move to virtual ID. But certainly for this year, it is just hard copy ID.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, first of all, thanks to Claire and her team for taking up some of those suggestions, including consultation and sharing this important message with the SEN and Learning Disability Charities. I'm also pleased to learn that there was an engagement event at the university. So my first question is around that, how successful that was, considering that we want to get young people involved with the local democracy. And my second question is, we talked about City Life magazine and the issues that we had with delivery to all the addresses. Has this been fixed and addressed with the company that we are using? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for those questions, Councillor. The roadshow that we carried out at the university, likewise at other venues, that there has been a lot of interest in the pop-up banners and the flyers, lots of questions being asked. Not so many applications being made at those venues, but there does seem to be quite a good interest in what the new requirements are and the types of different ID, what's appropriate and acceptable ID for the day. So they're very worthwhile doing, because it is raising that awareness, and hopefully those people that have asked those questions will spread that information within their own social networks. If okay with you, through you, Chair, I can provide an update on the company that we use to distribute City Life. I've had that conversation with our communications manager, and I'll get an update for you and report back. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, just to reiterate the question that I posed to you earlier on, but about the people who could come in, and there's an online information on website where if they didn't have their own passport or a license or a photo ID, they would come to the customer services, and we would provide that. And just the dates as well, would you just kindly process that for me?
Through you, Chair. Yes, certainly I can let you have that information. Will do, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll echo everybody's comments. Thank you for the Democratic Services team for all the work they've done on this. With the visits to the community hubs, is it just one visit per community hub, or will there be opportunity before the 25th of April to repeat visits?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. If you do have any other suggestions, please let me have them. We're obviously doing as much as we can that's humanly possible within the resource level that we've got. But if you think there's a particular venue that would benefit a visit, please let me know and I can consider that. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I noticed that you've had 120 applications to date. have you got any feeling as to whether that's a reasonable number? Do you think there are still loads and loads of people out there who don't know what's going on and there's going to be a big rush at the end, or that people are just going to fail to get the voter certificate?
Difficult question to answer in terms of we're doing everything we can humanly possible to ensure that the message is out there in the community with our social media posts and our visits and all the other measures that we have in place. In terms of that number and how comparable that is with our neighbouring authorities, we're roughly around the same. So it's not a surprising figure to us, and we're certainly managing to process those numbers within our existing staff resource.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting. So firstly, Claire, thank you very much, and the Democratic Services team for all the work you've done. I find it interesting that so many councillors are sat around the table concerned about whether people have got voter ID and whether they know. We're the people who want them to vote for us. Surely it's beholden upon us to get out and inform them one way or another. And I'll blow my own job. I've hand-delivered a letter to every resident in my ward telling them that they need voter ID. In truth, I've only had one person come back to me who I've taken a postal vote to, but I don't know how many have then gone directly to you, because obviously that's where the letter told them to. So it's upon us. You know, if we want them to get out there, then really what you're doing is fabulous, but actually we need to get out and let people know you need voter ID, because we're the people who want the vote. They're not voting for you. I'm sure they would, Claire, if you stood. Always... But yeah.
But you don't know that we're not doing that, do you? I mean, I do agree, but we could be doing that, and we just haven't mentioned it.
As I say, I don't know what other people are doing. What I'm saying is, there seems to be this huge concern, but we'll only find out whether there's a real issue post the election.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you to the Democratic Services for their input in trying to implement this new measure. It is a massive change. I think we've got to accept the fact that this is a biggest change in democratic services that the country has faced in recent times. So it's going to be a change, and people will not, you know, a lot of people will come with the wrong identification, and a lot of people will miss out. It's being as much prepared as we can. We'll do our bit. Take Councillor Mitchell's point. We'll do our bit, but the point is how much help we can give them on that day to ensure that as many people that want to exercise their right to vote get that chance to do so. And what you said through you, Chair, Claire, regarding with the resources we have available, we need the confidence that you have enough resources available to ensure that people that have issues on that day will be turned around and will be able to vote if they have that correct documentation. And that's the reassurance the general public need. It is a big change. You know, people are not used to it, and a lot of people will leave it to the last minute, and a lot of people won't come with the right documentation, and it will be a last minute panic to try to sort that out. So I need some reassurances that people will have the confidence in the city councils that they'll be able to turn around their applications.
Mine's a purely hypothetical question, but if after the cut-off date, I don't know, perhaps people went on holiday, they got their passport stolen, whatever, and they came back without any photo ID, do we have any leeway in producing something at the last minute?
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson, through you, Chair. Yes, there is a process in place for an emergency voter identification certificate, which I believe can be obtained up until 5 o'clock on election day.
In that case, can I ask you to sorry, I jumped up. in front of myself. No, I've still lost it. I need the agenda. Are the committee happy to note the progress made to date on this matter? Thank you very much. I'm minded now to tackle the agenda in a slightly different order because we've got a number of people sitting at the back of the room. Oh, thank you very much, Claire. With specific interests. So as long as nobody objects, I'd like to go to item 8, the referral report and standing up for responsible tax conduct. And then the item 9 on the rugby club, and finally, item 10 on boxing. Okay, so we're going to tackle agenda item 8 next, which is a referral report on standing up for responsible tax conduct, and I think that is Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, members. You'll recall that this was a matter which was considered at Council, at the last Council meeting, and was referred on to committee for discussion and consideration. The report simply presents the declaration as it was considered at the Council, but we were asked in particular to look at the 9 items which were listed as actions which the Council was resolving to. So I've added some commentary against those 9 items. I've had some discussion with the Fair Tax Foundation too, to understand their perspective on some of these things, and I'll just feed back that. If members are okay, I'll just run through those 9 items and just summarise those comments there. So the first one is approve the Fair Tax Declaration. My understanding is that we have approved this at Council, so I'm not anticipating that we go back to Council with a further report, unless there is anything at this meeting which suggests that there is a problem with it. The report itself doesn't present there are any issues there. So that is my understanding, that tonight's decision will be sufficient to refer back to the Council meeting to say that that declaration has already been made. Number 2, leading by example and demonstrating good practice. The only issue really here is that good practice is not readily defined. Many people make choices around their tax payments. If you open an ISA savings account, for example, that's a decision about not paying tax. So there are always questions about how you apply decision making in respect of tax, and the Council has those same questions. For instance, when we're thinking about VAT and our de minimis threshold, we might think about different types of business activities and the way that we conduct them. So we remain on the right side of that. And thinking about purchasing of assets, we also take decisions there. So it's not readily defined what good practice is. And I think what we simply have to do is continue to operate with the spirit of this declaration, that we're trying to define good practice for ourselves and be consistent in the way that we apply that. In terms of IR35, that's considered every time we implement a contract for employment. So that one we consistently do already. In terms of number 4, not using offshore vehicles, as far as I'm aware, we're not using any offshore vehicles, and we wouldn't intend to, so I don't see any issues with that. In respect of undertaking due diligence for not-for-profit structures, community interest companies and so on, I find this slightly problematical, because you can't always determine whether an organisation working with has set up as a community interest company, for example, because it's a community interest company or because it's trying to set itself up for a particular tax position. I think we will always try to understand what the purposes of any of the companies that we work with are, what their intentions are and their objectives, and we consider their tax position in respect of that, and the way that they're structured, that would be considered as part of a bidding process. And that actually follows on to point 6, which is around clarity. I make the point here that, ultimately, if a company is being very clear about its tax practices, that doesn't necessarily lead us to a decision as to whether we would work with that company or not. But the Fair Tax Foundation's view is really that if people or companies are clear about their arrangements, then that is in itself a good thing. If people can understand what people's position is and what their objectives are and how they set themselves up for tax purposes, then simply having that level of clarity is in itself a worthwhile pursuit. And it will help us, I think, in the future to think about what we're doing through our procurement processes and what our objectives are and what we're trying to do. So in that respect, it represents good practice. Number 7, I slightly misunderstood the purpose of that one. That's been clarified, that what they were talking about there about companies which we've established, we have a majority of stake in. Well, we don't have any of those, so that's not one that's going to concern us particularly. And in terms of supporting Fair Tax Weeks, no objections to supporting that. There aren't any planned events locally, as far as I'm aware. I couldn't find any by reviewing their programme for the 8th to the 18th of June. But we could promote that and put information on our own website to say that we support that activity. That would be in the spirit of the declaration. And then finally, support calls for reform of procurement law. The Foundation is doing a lot of work in that area. By the declaration itself, we are supporting that work, and we could continue to look at the guidance and information that they send us and share that in terms of supporting good tax conduct. So there are no grounds, as far as I can see, for objection to supporting the declaration. There are some grey areas in respect of tax practice, but I think that's down to us to make our own decisions about the way that we want to promote that. So from a point of view of the council's finances and so on, we're not committing to anything. There isn't an accreditation process. We're simply declaring that we support the work of the Foundation.
Thank you very much, Shane. Yes, I have Steve and Chris. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking at the financial implications, where it says presently there will be no financial implications to supporting this unless anything major comes up that we're not aware of at the moment. So if that's the case, physically, are we going to do anything different to what we're doing already?
Through you, Chair, this doesn't commit us to any actions that we're not currently undertaking, but we will continue to look at our procurement processes, for example, and try to ensure that they comply with the spirit of the Fair Tax Declaration, and continue to look at the way that we engage with businesses and seek appropriate conduct. So it doesn't commit us to any specific actions, Steve, but it's certainly something. I mean, there is a national review of procurement processes when we will engage with that and revise our own procurement processes in line with it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, basically what we're doing is a pretty much normal good practice, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Shane, number 3 talks about ensure IR35 is implemented robustly. I assume contractors have the right of appeal against any decision we make, because companies get it wrong. Organisations can get it wrong. IR35 is a relatively complex area, and without knowing the organisation, whether the contractor is a organisation or an individual, makes a massive difference, be it through substitution or whatever. So I assume we have a right to appeal on that.
Through you, Chair, the process is one of negotiation, Chris. So as we get to the point of appointing a contractor, we'll consider whether IR35 applies, and that will then be a discussion with the individual or the organisation that we're working with. So if they feel that the arrangements which we're going to have to put in place in respect of tax for that contract isn't appropriate for them, then they have that choice whether they want to continue to work in the contract or otherwise. So it'll be a matter of agreement in each individual case. Yep.
Okay, thank you. My other concern is probably too strong a word. There are some grey areas, as you've highlighted, where we've been asked to do stuff that is either complex. Do we have the technical ability to carry out some of the functions we've been asked to carry out, or is this going to require additional resource? And the reason I say that is because if we, having signed up to this, then are found to not have, a company does have an offshore agreement that we didn't know about. What liability sits on us or not? Does it mean we can then immediately terminate that contract or not? we sign up to something which I have no issue with. It's what are the consequences of that, both whether they be in resourcing your team and the council to carry out the additional due diligence work that is being required. And if we are at a later date, we suddenly find out that an organisation, an individual we've contracted with, you know, I'll be stupid, but, you know, has an offshore account in the Canary Islands where they're washing millions of pounds through, what's the recourse of that? We may not like it, it may not be illegal, I say, so there's some challenging questions there.
Thank you,
We're
Chris.
doing
Yes,
something.
through you,
Why?
Chair. I think, and I'm possibly not the best person to answer some of that, because obviously it relates to our government and our procurement arrangements. What is clear at the moment is that we can't, through the procurement process, specify specific tax conduct. You know, procurement has to apply in a general sense. So if there are organisations which we undertake to work with and are, you know, enter into a contract too, then we'll need to abide by the terms of that contract. If it transpires that we understand that they're carrying out tax arrangements which are unlawful, then I think we would have a duty to report that to the relevant authorities and you know, would argue or examine the contract to see where we stood in terms of breach of contract for any activity which we found them to be engaged in. So again, we'd have to look at it case by case, but we're not committing to anything that we wouldn't do anyway under those circumstances. That would be existing practice.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Will this affect of adopting of this policy affect any procurement or bidding processes? Will it unduly advantage or disadvantage any smaller players that in the market? That's question number one. And secondly, in terms of undertaking due diligence, how far do we go? I mean, how many steps is an acceptable level of checks we go in terms of obviously checking how far down the rabbit hole do we go? I just need some reassurance regarding that.
Thank you, through you, Chair. In terms of the second part of that, we have got a series of steps within procurement processes. So contracts up to a certain value then need to be subject to a greater level of scrutiny and go through a more detailed process. So it depends, essentially, is the answer to that question, on the value of the contract. You know, the more, obviously, the higher value, the more that we'll do due diligence work and make sure that we are being as thorough as possible. In terms of whether or not it will have any impact in respect of outlawing or preventing any contractors to apply, again, we can't be specific around tax conduct in terms of that. So we would not be in a position where we would be saying to a company, you can't apply for this, or we won't engage with you because of your particular tax position. Okay, so no, it shouldn't bar anybody. And in fact, you know, it's entering into the spirit of the thing. We will look more closely at our procurement processes and try to use those to engage, you know, more companies. I mean, they should have the effect of increasing the number of organisations we work with rather than reducing them.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Shane for, you know, looking at this so carefully and giving us some a better understanding and more insight into what is involved. It has been a long-standing policy of the Labour Party and of the Cooperative Party, so, you know, I'm very happy for the council to embrace this and sign the declaration. I guess it's a pity that, if you like, there isn't kind of more teeth within it. You know, it's an aspiration, and an aspiration absolutely a support, and obviously a pity that, you know, national legislation is not more helpful in kind of carrying out the spirit of what's intended here. But thank you for the extra information, and I hope, you know, that as a council we will be able to support it and do what we can in terms of fairness and equity.
Thank you, everybody. I totally support this motion myself. But I think it's clear from what Shane has said that we're already pretty good in this area. And by signing up to this fair tax the fair tax kind of framework, we're just making ourselves even more aware of good practice. I'd really like to see us have a promotion during Fair Tax Week. So I hope that doesn't get lost in between now and June. Is everybody happy to move on? There isn't actually an approval, okay? So. Oh yes, we resolve to implement the motion. Do we resolve? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. The next item on the agenda is item 9, a council referral report on Worcester Warriors Club. I think that's you, David.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start by reminding everybody of the background to this matter. At the council meeting of the 21st of February, Councillor Hodgson presented a motion with amendments that was agreed. And if you see in paragraph 2.1, the 2 bullet points, I was charged with writing to James Sandford and Jim O'Toole, setting out those points that were made there. And I've done so, and you will see the reply from James and Jim in Appendix 1. In addition to that, there was a further amendment to the amended motion, and that amendment to the amendment was then amended as per paragraph 2.3. Sorry, guys, 2.3. I hope you're keeping up with this. And that was to refer the report to this committee. You will see that in terms of further information, I have subsequently spoken with Wychavon Council. I spoke with the Chief Executive, Vic Allison, and you will see in section 3, we have set out some further information, in particular with regard to the CPO process. I won't go through all of that, but just I would like to draw your attention to one particular point, which is paragraph 3.4, which refers to paragraph 24 of the government's guidance on compulsory purchase and compensation. And that guidance makes the point that compulsory purchase is intended as a last resort. So I'll just make that point. As a result of my discussions with Wychavon, and as a result of considering the guidance, my recommendation is that the committee considers the matter and agrees that I request a meeting between Wychavon Worcester City Council and Wychavon District Council in the light of the letter from Jim O'Toole to consider next steps. I would also draw your attention to the appendix, because in that letter, Jim O'Toole has offered to come along and speak with members face to face. I did suggest, in response to Jim's offer, that he make himself available for May the 23rd, which is a committee meeting. I don't suggest that it is part of the committee, but if members are available for the committee, it may be convenient for members to meet with Jim before that meeting. So Jim's letter actually contains a typo. That's not May the 25th, that's May the 23rd. So I don't think I need to say any more really, other than the preferred options was to write to Wychavon to seek a follow-up meeting. In terms of alternatives, the opportunity, of course, is not to write to Wychavon as proposed, and this would mean that the requirements of the original motion were fulfilled, but the council is taking no further action. And the alternative option would also be to write to Wychavon Council requesting them to consider using their CPO powers. As I've said in the main body of the report, that is not my recommendation, as the guidance is clear that CPO powers should be used as a last resort. So with regard to the recommendation, as stated in the report, plus the offer of a meeting that Jim has made in his response to my letter, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I have Stephen. Adrian.
Yes, I'd like to thank our Chief Executive for borrowing of the motion we had at Council. I think it was a very important motion. It gave councillors the opportunity to express their concern and also our love of the Warriors and what it has on the sporting life of our city. In that, it is very disappointing that we are where we are now in March and we still don't know if anything is going to happen next season. I doubt if it is, and that this process still has not completed yet. And I think we are where we are now. This is definitely not the end of the story, and there will be things probably coming out in the next few days and weeks ahead. So I think where we are now, I think we just have to just accept what's on the paper.
Thanks. I mean, I have to say that I'd welcome some clarification from Councillor Hodgson, because I don't know what he's talking about. He says where we are now. We just accept what it says on the order paper. What do you mean by that? Do you mean that you will agree to the preferred option of the managing director to take those steps? Is that what you're saying, or are you saying you're just going to, put the paper in the bin and forget about it? I'm a bit uncertain as to which way you're headed, and I'd appreciate an answer before I continue my little bit.
I think take those steps that were actually mentioned. No, we certainly shouldn't put it in the bin, and certainly I do think if Jim O'Toole can come and actually say anything, if he has anything to actually say, to be honest with you, or is he just going to say more stuff that he's not in a position to actually deliver? Because that's really what we want. Really, we want to know where we stand, because at the moment very little has actually happened.
Thank you for that clarification, such as it was. I mean, I fully supported the initial approach that Stephen was taking at the council meeting, and I added the reference to a CPO because I think there's a lot of concern over the site, the land itself, and the position of Worcester Warriors in the future. And having had a conversation with a number of people, this was not totally just off my own bat, it felt that we had an opportunity, really, as a range of local authorities, to try and do something to intervene to secure the asset in order that whatever else happened, we knew that that was there for perpetuity, and we could work around that with Stourbridge, Wasps, Atlas, Worcester Warriors, Worcester RFC, whoever was likely to get involved. And I think what has been demonstrated so far is this complete lack of clarity about what is happening. There is very little transparency going on, and you may argue that in the business world that is not unusual, and it's nothing to do with us. But I think, you know, it's widely recognised that that public sport is very much to do with us as the public. So I think it's a shame that we still don't know when the 90 days clock started and when it finishes. That we don't know whether Stourbridge have been asked to agree, have agreed or disagreed with the proposal, whether WASPs are on board with having their home games, so-called home games at Six Ways. WASPs themselves have always been a bit of a transitory club anyway, so that we wouldn't know what that might mean. It's been announced recently that the women's side have secured their place in the 15s and secured sponsorship, but we don't know that they've secured agreement with Atlas to play at Six Ways. Atlas themselves don't own the site. They have a license to occupy, in my understanding. I might be wrong, but my understanding of a license to occupy, not actually an agreement to own the site just yet. And so there are all these different things up in the air. And the only people who have any authority whatsoever to do anything about this are the local authorities. Now, I don't think, I understand why David's gone to some length about CPO and what it means, but I don't think he's said anywhere there what I think is the position on a CPO, which is one authority can't CPO property outside its own boundaries. So it was never going to be a situation where Worcester City Council could CPO the ground because it's outside the City Council boundary. So there obviously, if there was going to be anything, any move, and what this was intended to do was not to upset anybody and anybody at all in other authorities, was aimed at a prompt to consider this. It would have to be subject to some further discussion and negotiation, and that clearly has not happened yet. And so I fully support what David is recommending in 4, which is seeking a meeting with between the City Council and Wychavon District Council to see if there is anything which could be developed in the light of Jim O'Toole's letter, which we've had. So I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's a very good step forward. I would throw the County Council into that mix, to be honest. The County Council, as my understanding, again, and there are so many rumours and so messages all over the internet, aren't there, about this, but my understanding is that the County Council has the lease on the bus park there for a very long time, so that when all this first started, somebody said, oh, what's going to happen to all that? The County Council made a statement, as I recall, that said very definitely, don't worry about the bus park, it's ours, we've got it for however many 100 years, and therefore it's that you don't need to worry about it. So I think they ought to be in the mix in terms of that meeting and discussion as well, because it provides that that provides a level of stability as well, the sort of thing that we're looking for. I have no preconception about where we end up at the end of this as to whether Atlas are in charge, who the coach is, whether there's a team or what division it is in, and who they play with or against. Our main concern is to secure that site for the purposes for which it was built and for purposes for which Cecil put his money into it, which is to be playing Premiership rugby. And I think that that's the important thing we ought to focus on. And I'm sorry if I've upset other people in the process of raising these issues, but at some point in the public arena, those things have to be said. So I'd fully support what the recommendation suggests at the moment. And as an outcome of that meeting, then we would consider whether it was appropriate to invite Jim to come and talk to the committee or a group of councillors in addition to that.
Thank you, Adrian. Do you have any response, David?
Yes. So just to be clear for members, the recommendation is to be amended to include Worcestershire County Council in the invitation, and in terms of your preferred sequencing is to have that meeting prior to invite in Jim O'Toole along to discuss the situation with City Council. May I also add that members may wish to consider, and the letter from Jim came after we'd finalised the report, so I wasn't able to make any particular reference to the letter in the report other than to say it would be attached. One other matter that members may wish to consider is that if members are minded to invite Jim to come along and speak with members of this council, they may wish to extend that invitation to Wychavon and the county as well. But obviously that's for you guys to determine. Thank you.
And that's something we should determine now, presumably.
It would be very helpful for me in terms of taking forward the plans and setting out what our intentions are. Yes, if that's okay. Thank you.
Can I have Chris's contribution first?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very much on side with Stephen and Adrian in terms of I want O'Toole to come to this council to answer questions, so we have a clearer picture of what their plan is and where they will or won't meet the desire of most of the residents of Worcester to have Premiership, Championship, professional rugby. Where my concern comes, well, not concern, I want to structure that meeting though in such a way that it's not 35 councillors firing questions from different positions of knowledge, understanding. I think we need to be together and say, Rob, what's the outcome we want from the meeting? What do we want to know? So we have planned questions. So, and Adrian, I take your point, we might want Wychavon there and Worcester County Council as well. These are the answers we want. Let's structure the meeting so that Jim O'Toole either walks away not answering the questions or not giving us satisfactory answers, or we actually get a clear picture of where we're going. I'm pretty confident that we will be left disappointed from the answers we hear on that night, whatever those questions may be. But I think the structure, I think the process is we as a group of councils confirm what we want to know. We confirm what questions will get us the answers that we want. Then we get Jim O'Toole in, ask him those questions, and they will either answer them. They failed to do so to date, Adrian, unless I'm missing something, or they won't. And if they answer them, we'll either be happy because they'll tell us we're going to have some professional rugby up at Six Ways, or they won't, and we'll be still none the wiser and equally disappointed that we've got a fabulous stadium, which, you know, Cecil Duckworth has invested his life into, and his two rogues have blooming left the city bereft. So that's the way I'd like to do it. I really what I'm saying, I want that meeting structured. I don't want 35 of us asking them what colour strip they're going to be playing in and whether they're talking to Stourbridge and why they hadn't talked to what. Let's get a real product, you know, let's have a Senate board sort of thing.
Yes, David.
If members are minded, I'm happy to arrange with members to have those questions set out prior to the meeting, and then we can send those to Jim O'Toole in advance so that he can come prepared to answer them. Otherwise, it would be, as you say, rather disappointing if on the night he's not aware of the things that are going to be raised and is unable to answer questions and needs to go away, for example, and find additional information. So if members want to go down that route, then we can arrange to get some questions prepared or topics prepared, however you want to phrase it, in advance and provided to Jim before the meeting. Thank you.
Would it therefore be a good idea to, I mean, this is a subject that matters an awful lot to some people and not so much to other people. So maybe it would be an idea to get the people who really care about this together to come up with that list of questions. You might even call it a, you know, very short-term task and finish group. And maybe we could sort out tonight who might want to be in that. The other thing I was going to say is, when in the letter, when he talks about coming to the May the 23rd council meeting, is this a full council or a meeting of this, a P&R?
Oh, P&R, Chair.
Okay. In which case, I think that's much more sensible. I do think that, you know, the people who care about this should get together and come up. I shouldn't say that really, because you probably know what category I'm in. I mean, I do, I do absolutely see the importance of this institution to the people of Worcester, and I do want it to stay. So where are we up to? Oh yeah, Lynn.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's really important to the Warriors Rugby Club is really important to this city, is important to Worcester. You know, I am not in the enthusiast category of, you know, wanting to watch rugby. And I think, you know, some of the motions that have come to council have come from, you know, lifelong rugby fans. But as a district council, and Worcester Warriors is part of the city identity and is actually, you know, really important in many other aspects of the city, that it is a tourist attraction, it's part of kind of economic development, it's part of leadership around sport and sports participation, and has significant kind of community inreach. Some of that may or may not be wrapped up into Atlas. But I think it's clear that it's more important to this council than it is to Wychavon, you know, in terms of Wychavon's, you know, arguably, in, you know, that their physical remit and geographical remit is different, and arguably, you know, the kind of economic benefits from the rugby, the Warriors when they were at their peak, accrued more into this district than into Wychavon. So I think, you know, that it is important that we try to influence and that we try to do our best to rescue something out of the mess that is currently there.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to declare an interest, and I should have done it earlier. It's just dawned on me. So I'm a syndicate, part of a syndicate that owned a box that lost money on the closure of the club, and I probably should have declared that. I'm sorry.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Oh yes, John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the concern really is how much power do we really have in all of this, in shaping it from the position that we sit, or taking the points everybody's raised in terms of the importance of it and the you know, the legacy of Cecil, and the enormous impact that they have. How much power do we really have? So it's really, really important that when we go in with this this meeting, that we understand our position in this, and that the more we can be aligned with and get our partners on board, whether that be the county council, whether that be Wychavon, so that they understand and our positions are aligned, the more weight we will have in that meeting. And I think it's really important that we don't go in with a combative stance, and that all our partners are on board, and that and between us we can leverage some sort of negotiating power.
I certainly feel that as a supporter of the Warriors, I've been a supporter for many, many years, and I think the whole of Worcestershire supports the Warriors, not just Worcester. Worcester is is a part of it, but isn't all of it. We also need to not forget the Warriors Foundation as well, and all the support that they have in the local community and that sort of thing. And I feel as though we are perhaps a broker in this matter, and whatever the outcome will be, I think we can influence it. So I think it's important that actually Wychavon and the county also get involved as well, to really thrash out the things that we need to be considerate. I was actually at the meeting on the Saturday, and it was 3 hours of very intensive things. And at the moment, Atlas haven't responded. They might do, we don't know. But at the moment, it's silence. So.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak?
I need to clarify, Chair, that we would like the matter discussed between the councils as a first step. I think we've got that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Having prepared our position and knowing what we want. So with those two clarifications, are we happy to accept the recommendation of this report? Yeah. Yes, thank you, everybody. How much? Okay. So we now move on to agenda item 10, boxing events on council premises. I hand over to David.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start by saying that this is not something that officers have considered lightly. This is something that we have spent a lot of time considering in terms of our recommended position. I should also say that today I spoke to the father of the young man that died. That was at his request. I'd had a message to give him a call. So out of courtesy, as you would imagine, I did call him back earlier today. And it's a very difficult situation to be in when you're talking to the bereaved parent of a 26-year-old man. And it underlines to me how important this matter is. It's not something that we are taking lightly. So on that note, you will all know the background to this. The young man died following serious injuries after a ultra white collar boxing event at Tramps nightclub. And as a result of that, we are awaiting the outcome of a report from Worcester Regulatory Services and the Coroner's Office. Officers, have over time received a number of applications to use council premises for boxing events from many and varied organisations, and I absolutely accept that no two organisations are the same, no two organisations are working to the same standards or affiliations. But at the time, in view of the gravity of the situation, myself and the leadership team took the decision that we should temporarily suspend the opportunity of boxing tournaments to take place in city council premises. We also presented that decision to members, and at the time members agreed that that was the right thing to do. We're now nearly a year on from that event, and I'm hesitating because of the conversation I had earlier today, if I'm honest. It was incredibly moving. So we're nearly a year on from that situation, and so it is timely for us to put this decision in front of members. And we have a number of options. So we could recommend to members that we turn the temporary suspension into a permanent ban. We could recommend to members that we lift the temporary suspension. On the basis that we still haven't heard from the Coroner's Office or Worcester Regulatory Services, our recommendation is to continue with the current situation. We don't know the outcome of the inquiries. It may be that the findings of the inquiries, when they are made public, lead to changes in practices amongst boxing clubs. It may be that there are findings where this organisation, Ultra White Collar Boxing, may wish to change its approach. Then that may apply to other boxing clubs who may wish to change their practices, their methods in the light of the information that comes out of these reports. We don't know that information at the moment, and so we believe as officers it is prudent and appropriate to continue with the position we find ourselves in today. I have been told that the inquiry that was planned for, the coroner's inquiry that was planned for May has been delayed because reports are not available. So just as a clarification, I believe paragraph 2.4 is not correct now, and that I was informed of that today. So that's an update on the current situation. I think it's also important to say that this recommendation is not seeking to ban the participation in any boxing clubs. We're not seeking to limit the take-up of young people in boxing clubs. We're also not seeking to ban boxing clubs from holding tournaments in any other venues. So this is not something that we believe will limit or stymie or fetter opportunities for young people. There are plenty of other venues outside of Worcester City Council's own premises. In terms of our approach, we have recommended that we use the Boxing England affiliation. And the reason for that is relatively simple, that as officers, we are no experts in this field. And it would be very, very difficult for us to take every individual application to hold a tournament in one of our venues and look at the affiliations, look at the rules that they apply, look at their safety standards, and make an accurate, objective judgment on any and every single application. We are not in a position to be able to do that, unfortunately. We're not experts in the field. And so therefore, our recommendation is you might say slightly draconian, but is relatively straightforward, where we are using the Boxing England affiliation as our current benchmark. And we believe that in view of where we stand with the pending results of the inquiries, that's the most appropriate position to continue with. So I will say no more other than that I'll welcome any questions or queries from members. Thank you.
And then Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to talk about the background to this, David, but unfortunately, because you've aired it, I feel compelled to. You say you brought it to members. Unfortunately, you didn't. You brought it to the leaders group. The leaders group is not a decision-making body, and I objected to it at that point when you raised it. I raised my concerns. So let's get that clear. So the only reason this paper's here is because I demanded that you put the paper in front of us because you couldn't, leadership team couldn't make that decision. Because unfortunately, and you hit the nail exactly on the head, you don't have the expertise because what you've done, or what the paper's done, and trust me, the intent of the paper is absolutely right. We should not be holding ultra-white collar boxing events in our venues whilst the investigation goes on. I'd be happy not to hold ultra-white collar events in our venues post the investigation, whatever it finds, because that's not boxing, that's milling. But what you have done, the way the paper has been written, is you've blocked boxing clubs, amateur boxing clubs, of which there are 4 or 5 in the city, of which only one is affiliated with English boxing, from holding events. And there are not loads of venues in this city to hold events. And I speak from personal experience because I held an amateur boxing event between the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers and the Royal Engineers for Help for Heroes about 8 years ago. And the only event only place I could find that was sufficiently big enough, and I didn't want to go to Perth as well because I didn't think it was suitable for the event, was out at Bransford Hotel. So there aren't loads of events. The only other place I've ever been to a boxing event in the city is at Six Ways, and that's the only other place probably big enough, and that's not ideal for obvious reasons. We just discussed that because it's not open. So what this paper, while the intent is good, it has prevented boxing clubs, and let's just define, let me be clear, and I have no boxing credentials like the gentleman who spoke earlier, Mr. Shaw, and I'd like to thank you for your articulate presentation. I haven't boxed for England, but I have boxed in the army, and I have run the boxing team at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, so I have some knowledge of the sport. Ultra-white collar boxing takes a bunch of men or women under some spurious organiser and gives them 6 to 8 weeks training, of which they don't have to turn up. And then at the end of it, however many are left, they match. They might match a 16-stone guy against a 14-stone guy, but that's as near as they can get. When you're talking amateur boxing clubs, there are stringent rules, even more so when the youths are involved, of weight categories. So you'll never have someone overmatched in terms of size or age. You'll never have someone overmatched in terms of experience, because amateur boxing clubs know how many fights the people they're putting in the ring, if they have had a fight previously, have had. And there is a limit. Once you get past, my memory is correct, 9, you're no longer a novice. So there are loads of boxing clubs who do have the experience. And I don't think it's a challenge to say, on an individual basis, a boxing club wants to hold an event in our facility, show us your credentials, who's fighting who, let's have a look. Are you fighting another boxing club? Because if you're not, that's not happening. And it's a very straightforward process. So happy to cancel ultra-white collar boxing in our facilities forever, to be perfectly honest. Not happy to cancel boxing, organised boxing establishments, recognised boxing clubs from holding events. Most children who go to boxing clubs, let's be honest, they don't tend not to come from the most affluent areas of the city. These are children from probably the poor areas who are being really well disciplined in training. It's a fantastic sport, and we heard earlier on. So what I'd like to do is amend the proposal as is written, and of course it's gone off my computer now. So, all right. And I'd like to approve the continued suspension of ultra-white collar boxing at events on council premises, other than amateur boxing club events, which on an individual basis can demonstrate that the event complies to recognised amateur boxing standards. and then it goes on until, and then the rest of the motion is presented there. And that way, we get rid of the rogue element of boxing, but we allow well-organised, well-run boxing clubs to continue to put on events in our facilities. And one of the reasons they use our facilities is because they're affordable. That's why we have our facilities, because they're more affordable for, you know, people can't afford to pay to go to Six Ways, it's expensive. And I think then we meet your well-intended intent of not having another disaster while still providing a facility for those recognised boxing clubs within the city or within the county, to be perfectly honest, because there's plenty of other boxing clubs outside of Worcester City. And that way, I think that is a sensible resolution. So I'd like to propose that amendment, and if I've got a seconder, and obviously other people want to speak, but slightly passionate about this.
Yes,
but
yes, we noticed. Can I ask first if anybody wants to speak on the original motion before we talk about the amendment? Yes, please, Shafaz. Sorry? Oh, you're seconding it.
I asked to speak before, I'm going to second it.
Okay, go on. Oh, I don't know. Thank you, Shafaz.
Well, you're the chair, so chair the meeting. Is there a seconder for the amendment? And you need that to show, and then you have a debate on the amendment, not on the original motion. If Shafaz wants to debate the original motion, he's got to wait till we've discussed the amendment. And how can he do that if he's seconding the amendment?
Thank you, Adrian, I appreciate that. So we have a seconder in Shafaz. And we proceed.
Yes. And now we discuss the amendment.
Okay, and who wants to speak on the amendment? Okay, right.
Could we actually have clarity as to what the amendment is and what it is we're now discussing?
It's not recorded. Approves. So again, the amendment is approves. So we get rid of the first line of there up until the point of until, so the first two lines, and then approves the continued suspension of ultra white collar boxing events at council premises, other than amateur boxing club events, which on an individual basis can demonstrate that the event complies to a recognised amateur boxing standards, until such a time that the outcome of the coroner's inquest referred to within the report and the Worcester Regulatory Services investigation can be reviewed, enabling a further report to be presented to the committee. I don't think Lynn has to approve.
No.
Approve it.
She understands. Oh, thank you. Okay. So, Shafaz.
I think what Mr. Mitchell said, well, Councillor Mitchell said, is quite self-explanatory. There's a huge difference, and I think we all need to educate ourselves on white-collar boxing and actual boxing. You're given 6 weeks, like Councillor Mitchell said, and they throw two random people together. One person will train very hard. The other person may think, oh, I've got till next week, or I've got till the week after, and it will come to a point where they're going to fight. They're a week before their fight. They have no idea to even defend themselves, let alone to fight. So I urge what Councillor Mitchell said about making the amendment.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Yes, John.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard really passionately about boxing here this evening, and we've heard really passionately from the Managing Director regarding the effect white collar boxing, and I completely understand the distinction. Having gone through Worcester Amateur Boxing Club when I was a youth, I understand the professionalism where that is involved in amateur boxing, the way they train, the way they conduct their business, and just simply from just looking at the website today, Worcestershire Amateur Boxing Club have a film form that they can fill out. You can put the details in, and they'll get back to you. In terms of that, they're affiliated with England Boxing. That gives us the reassurance that, and the confidence that everything that they do is in order, that the checks are in order, that everyone associated with that boxing club, when people are mothers, brothers are releasing their kids to those boxing club, that they're safe in the assurance that they are procedures that are being followed in terms of that. That's the assurance England Boxing gives. Us as a council, given the circumstances that we are, and that the fact that we are not banning boxing on anybody of any virtue, it is only the safest option for us at a council until the inquest and the hearing of that inquest is revealed to us and the findings of that kingdom. It is the only sensible option available to us this evening to go for, simply because we are not experts, we're relying on other evidence, a life has been lost, and we can't take that responsibility on ourselves in our leisure centres, in our buildings that we own, for anything like that to happen again. So even though I have a great love and a deep affection for boxing as a sport and as a participant, and the benefit, all the associated benefit that it brings to our communities and to our young people, I unfortunately can't back that amendment this evening.
Thank you, Jabba. Do we have?
Aladita wishes to speak.
Yeah, I'll take Alan next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly disappointed. I was going to have I put my hand quite early to talk about David, because I thought it was high maturity immature in a sense that we are banning somebody who, I wanted to ask the question because the white collar are two different boxing, and I'm not an expert, but I have to say I did go in the ring and showed a few pointers. Maybe I was out of breath before I could even do the second one. Anyway, that's me. But the whole concept of prejudging the outcome of the coroner's report is not fair, because that's a different kettle of boxing. It's white collar. That's why I wanted to ask a couple of questions of the who kindly gave a very eloquent, of events that what they do, and gave me sort of assurances to the. I'm sure that the parents who send their children or go in that contest are well assured by the safety. And I think he said it 3 times, 1, 2, and 3. The safety elements was very. And the bit that I'm very disappointed in, maybe our offices, in a sense, that didn't happen in our premises. It happened outside, and we sort of took it upon ourselves to ban somebody who's quite eloquently safe, and it's a different boxing. I'm not the expert. We always fight on that side that we look for experts in the report, and we spend thousands of pounds asking for lovely reports from experts, as we call them. And yet here, we don't have any evidence about what happened. It might be quite the contrary, but we've penalised somebody who's coming to do legitimate, supporting activity that he tried to book in. And I think what Chris alluded to was that it came to him, and he brought this up. And obviously the leadership said that, okay, we bring the paper, and ultimately you are the deciding group. So we are the ultimate deciding group. I mean, I don't know who the leader was with you and who took that a year ago. It's obviously, I'm not aware of it anyway. But I think on our premises, any of our, sorry, I didn't interrupt you, so please bear with me. and then you'll start saying, in our own premises, we adhere to enable people, support them. And at that particular supporting event that when it was open, I was very, very pleased with a young lady who came along and said, it's my child, who was 5-year-old or 6-year-old, was there. And I said, oh, why do you bring him here? She said, I know where he is for 5 minutes or an hour or whatever time that he was spending. So, and the other thing that I was very impressed by, he was enabling people who couldn't afford it. And this is our premises. We adhere to it. We say we're proud that we got supporting facilities, get these youngsters off the street and come and join it. And there's a guy who's, and what we were saying, well, hang on a minute, because something happened a year ago at a private event, white collar boxing. How he passed away, what happened, we don't know. So ultimately, David, I think we prejudged the decision when we suspended, boxing from all our premises. But I'm supporting the amendment.
David wishes to reply.
If I may, there are clearly different views around the table, and ultimately it will be for members to decide. But if I may just say, Councillor Ditter, twice you said that we were prejudging the outcome of the coroner's report. But in fact, the reason for the recommendation is that I believe we're doing the exact opposite. We are saying, and we are waiting until we receive the coroner's report. We are not suggesting a permanent ban or any change of circumstance or stance rather. We are waiting for the outcome of the coroner's report. We're not in any way as officers prejudging what the coroner might or might not find. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I have Adrian.
Thank you. I mean, a number of points have been made about that we're not experts in this. So it strikes me that if we're not experts, we have to rely on the national governing body to provide that guidance and regulation. And the England Boxing, or what used to be known as Amateur Boxing Association, is that organisation, isn't it? And I know that we heard earlier on from the speaker that they're affiliated to another organisation, and there are other organisations in existence, but there is only one national recognised regulatory body, and that is England Boxing. Boxing has a history of having different things going on all at the same time. It's the complications of different belts and weights is a particular tunnel that we don't want to really go down. But I would have thought that we're going to stick by a regulation, then this is the one that we stick by, and it doesn't prejudge anything in doing that. And I don't know, I can't remember if it says how long we would be continuing the suspension, but it seems that it would be once we have some more information, then we would bring that back to committee and reassess the position.
Thank you, Adrian. That is where I stand as well. I think that, you say if a boxing club is well run and well organised, then they should be able to box in the city. But how can we judge? We're not experts. So I do think that we should take account of whether a club is affiliated to England Boxing and use that as the criterion to judge. Stephen.
Yeah, I've got 2 points. First of all, we're waiting on...
Oh, sorry.
2 things. Yeah, first of all, we're waiting on this coroner's report, right? Is that likely to have some implication that doesn't just go beyond Worcester, but in fact will affect boxing across England in terms of its actually findings, in terms of its recommendations? Because that's the first thing we need to consider. Secondly, actually regarding if we do choose to have boxing in Worcester, it is a question I would suggest of choosing the actual official reputable governing body of the actual sport and that. And basically, we need to be able to draw up a list of those ones. And if you're not on that list, you basically cannot apply for a license in Worcester. And are there other local authorities who have come across this particular problem and they've resolved it by doing precisely that, coming up with actual list of organisations who those who can and those who can't? Because I think I'm a great believer in you know, not banning things, but actually finding a way around and actually accommodating things in that. And I think, you know, looking at the actual established body such as Boxing England, who got the protocols and procedures in place, that is the way to actually go on, and on the basis of basically to qualify, you've got to be affiliated to such an organisation, and secondly, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you can actually implement what that body is actually has in its practices.
Thank you, Stephen. Lynn, and my apologies.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I had some questions in terms of clarification with regard to the report and the original recommendation. I mean, amateur boxing is continuing, clubs are meeting, that activity is taking place within the city, and I think there is clearly a valuable role and involvement in those things, and the clarification that it's absolutely not about stopping that activity because that activity is continuing. So a question around actually when it says boxing events, what is it that's an event? Is it a public ticketed, paid for piece of entertainment? Is that what we're talking about? Entertainment in front of an audience and paid for? Because that's not completely clear in the report, and I think that's important to know. And then with regard to the proposed amendment, as I wrote it down, surely it is legally risky to specifically name, you know, if you ultra white collar boxing, I don't know whether that's a type of boxing, whether it's a company or a brand, but the proposed amendment is specifically picking them out from any other kind of boxing, which I would have thought is potentially legally problematic. Or is it, let me turn it around, is that a legally problematic to pick out that title?
Thank you, Lynn. I think that's a good point. Do you wish? Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on the? Oh, Steve. Sorry.
You remember me, Chair, really.
Oh, yes, I remember you now.
Yeah, I was just going to take on the point that Councillor Riaz was making before about the risk factor. And if there was that risk factor there, we would be aware of other local authorities doing similar. But unless officers can tell me any different from the sort of very, very short piece of research I've done, I can't see anywhere else doing this at all, suspending or banning, whichever, any boxing scenarios going on their premises. So yes, we'll have to wait for the outcome of the inquest, and it may be, I appreciate Worcestershire Regulatory Services are looking into the matter, but I suspect Health and Safety Executive are as well. And it may well be that that's the report that coroner's waiting for the inquest. But going on forward, in relation to saying about what risk we can take and what risk we can't take, I think it's fair to say that this sport has been going on for a long, long while. It is conducive to assisting young people get on in life. I think the amendment would almost automatically follow, because of the rules and regulations that are there for those bouts that we would be suggesting should go forward, as opposed to a different type of boxing scenario that is out of that remit. So for those reasons, I would support the amendment.
Yes, Shafaz.
Sorry, can I just respond to Lynn? I've just Googled white collar boxing, and it's literally just told me on Wikipedia what it means. So it's saying it's a form of boxing in which people, white collar professionals, train to fight at special events. And the most crucial part is it says most have no prior boxing experience.
Thank you. Yeah, just to reinforce, there is no legal issue, Lynn, because ultra white collar boxing is an event itself. It's not amateur boxing. By banning amateur boxing while we're waiting for a coroner's report that is going to report on white collar boxing, we will get no further information that would help us make a decision on amateur boxing in our organisation, in our facilities, than we have now. So, because that report isn't going to report on boxing, it's going to report on ultra white collar boxing. And to stipulate a single regulatory body of which we would approve, i.e. English boxing, is absolutely discriminatory. That is like saying no one can play football in this country unless they play for the English Football League. The Premier League is not part of the English Football League, yet they still play and run the risks. So by as long as it is an accredited body, and it takes about 10 seconds to Google ICB, have a look, and if you do a bit of due diligence, which I did, and said, can you send me your rules and regulations, which I've got, which absolutely mirror English boxing, it would take about 10 minutes to work out whether an organisation is an accredited organisation, because actually anyone who wouldn't be able to provide you the rules and regulations. So I don't think we're taking any risk, but what we are doing by saying only English boxing, that's 4 boxing clubs in this gym, in this city, that can't put on an event in one of our facilities. We've only got 5, because there's only 1 club in this city registered to English boxing, or affiliated with English boxing. So, hence, I think my motion meets the intent of not having unregulated boxing, because it is unregulated, ultra white collar, in our facilities. Absolutely agree. But it just enables other accredited boxing organisations to hold events other than those regulated by English boxing. Sorry, we have to go to a vote.
Thank you. Let's move to a vote on this. Will all those in favour?
So we're voting on the amendment.
We're voting on the amendment. So will all those in favour of the amendment please raise their hands? Will all those not in favour of the amendment please raise their hands?
That's 6.
That's 6 as well.
7.
It must be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The amendment, we have not carried the amendment. Right. So we now go back to the original recommendation. Does anybody wish to speak about that? Or can we go forward to a vote? Jabba.
Just in terms of the original motion, I mean, the point goes back to affiliation, goes back to affiliation and England boxing, and I'm just curious what the conditions or the of meeting England boxing's requirements are, and why the other 4 clubs within the city aren't affiliated. Is there just a genuine question? Is there a barrier to entry? Is there a cost issue? Is it what makes other boxing clubs not want to go down the England boxing route? And what are the credentials of ICB? Because I couldn't, I did a quick Google search and I wasn't able to find some of the credentials of ICB on there. So it'd be really interesting to. maybe as a part of a learning part of this motion, once we do our investigations of what the different governing bodies are and the affiliations and how they compare in terms of standards and why people choose to go with one and why people choose to go with others.
If I may, Chair, having
Yes,
spoken,
yes,
I've spoken to English Boxing twice. Their comment to me was that they can't comment on why some clubs decide to join them and why some don't. All I'll say is that having spoken to English Boxing and talked about coaching qualifications, facilities, etc., the club that are asking to fight put on an event here and then looking at ICBs would meet all of English Boxing's requirements. It might be cost, I don't know. There are many other reasons why. Just like some people play for one football league and other people play for another football league. I don't know. So yeah, what I will say though is that this decision we're taking tonight means that that boxing event that happens annually and has happened annually in our facility, we are preventing tens and tens of children from taking part in an event that many of them will have trained for years to get to, and then the impact on their parents who get the joy of going to watch their child compete at sport. And I find that just untenable, I'm afraid, when we've been presented with an absolutely sensible reason of why that event can happen. It may now happen somewhere else. And I'll tell you what, if it's more expensive to happen in another ward and I've got a ward grant, then I'll put it towards it because I would want that event to happen.
Thank you, everybody. Does anybody else wish to speak? Robin?
It's just a question really. How many events have we turned down in the since the decision was made? Last year.
We don't know that, but we can find out and let you know. Anyone else? Sorry?
I just, whether Lloyd knew the answer or had something
None.
to contribute.
None, okay. None.
The answer's 1, not 0.
All right, okay. So can we move to the vote on the original amendment? The original motion, sorry. The original motion. The recommendation. All those in favour? All those against? 1. 2. Any abstentions? Thank you, everybody. Okay, thank you. Shall we plough on, or do people want a break? Plough on, okay. So the next item is agenda item 7, the Capital and Investment Strategies 2022-23 to 2024-25. I think that's you, Shane.
Thank you, Chair. These capital and investment strategies are statutory documents. We're required to present them, and they have to be authorised by full council. So the recommendation is that they are moved on to council for agreement at its next meeting. In truth, they were developed as part of the government's attempts to address the problem of local authorities investing in commercial assets. And because of the changes in the PWLBs, they rather outlived their purpose, and we're still statutorily obliged to provide them, so we continue to do that. In fact, much of the information is included in the 2 very important reports we do annually around our treasury management status, and it reproduces much of that same information. I'll only draw members' attention to one matter, which is under paragraph 2.8, where we have our authorised limits and operational boundaries for borrowing. So that sets the overall limits of borrowing. And as you can see, we're not intending to substantially increase our borrowing. I would clarify, though, that the table there is not quite correct. It's in fact the table in the report, table 6 within the report itself is the correct version of that. So just for clarification, it's entirely my own fault. I failed to copy the relevant tables through to the report. So I don't think there are any matters of any significance. As I say, we're not changing our practices. We're not extending our investment in commercial activities any more than we have previously agreed at council. But if members are happy, we will take this through to council for agreement at its next meeting. Thank you.
Any comments, questions? Lynn.
Thank you. I mean, just to say thank you to officers, thank you to Shane. They are really clearly expressed documents, and it is important to note these, that prudent use of public money and how we invest that money, the priorities within the document, within the strategy, are absolutely sensible ones, and particularly in the financially challenging times that we're in uncertain times. So thank you to officers, thank you for setting it out so clearly that it's almost understandable by those who are less financially literate, and I commend the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, what I didn't get in the last discussion was an answer on whether we are breaching equality and diversity rules on that decision. I'm happy for that to answer, come to me later after the meeting, because I would like some investigation into that, because we clearly are, because we are enabling one group of people to do something and another group of people not to, for no other reason than they're not in a certain club. But so I look forward to the answer from the legal advisor on that. My question on this is, if we need to amend limits of spend, does that come back to P&R with a paper requesting that, or does that come to full council?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, in terms of the operational boundary and the authorised limits for borrowing, that will come to P&R in respect of any particular proposal, but will ultimately need to be authorised by full council.
Thank you.
For 2020.
Thank you, Chair. This is the stage we've reached now at the end of this financial year, moving into the next to reset our performance scorecard for each of the committees. So we've been through all of the other committees. This is the final one in the process. Normally at this stage, we'll have populated the city plan projects and activities in more detail. However, we've yet to go through the process of identifying the set of priorities ourselves as a corporate leadership team and in discussion with group leaders. So those will take place over the next few months, and then we'll populate that according to our agreed set of priorities when we come to the new term after May. In respect of the those that are removed, those are all where was this responsibility to bring the bid forward, and that was completed, and that is now being worked through the individual committees. So they're not disappearing, they're all in other locations now. In respect to the performance indicators, we've now got more information, particularly around the customer focus areas. So there's a lot more focus on that particular set. So we'll have a much better understanding going forward of how well we're interacting with customers and what we're learning from them in terms of the satisfaction with our services. There was one which was dropped, which is down at the bottom. That's assessing the quality, the percentage level of service quality received. That was the proposal around understanding the calls that people are making, listening into those calls and making a quality assessment. We found in practice that we couldn't reasonably do that in any kind of objective way. So we've decided to remove that one. And then one final one, under Creative Council, we've included a measure of the budget gap reduction. Members will recall from our budget meetings that we have a budget gap of 1.7 million this year, rising to 2.2 million in the coming year. And therefore, we want to track our progress towards meeting that, the steps we're going to take during the course of the year to try and meet that gap. And so we will be bringing back a quarterly report to this committee to advise you of progress and engage with you in discussion around that. That's any questions that members have, then I'm happy still to consider this before we produce a final version. Thank you.
Excuse my ignorance, but where does the Scala Theatre project sit?
Through you, Chair, that's undertaken through PED committee. That's part of that set of activity through there. But as often,
overarching thing was going to be in this committee.
Yeah, in terms of, sorry, Lucy, I was going on to say that because of the overall volume of that, then it tends to come here because of the scale and scope of it. So it will form one of those projects which we're monitoring going forward.
But it's not actually here at the moment.
Sorry, just to reiterate, we will be populating those set of projects once we've determined what the full set of priorities are.
Right,
so it will come in due course. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yes, Stephen.
Yes, looking at the scorecard, this reminded me of the days when I was chairing performance management and budget scrutiny for many years, looking at some of these statistics. And what I would say is what would really help would be if we had some accompanying definition for some of these, because I haven't got a clue what 1 star means per staff survey. I mean, normally if I see a review of something and it's given 1 star, it usually means that it's not very good. So some definition there would be actually quite useful. I'm assuming the traineeships refers to the number of days per year per employee, but I'd like a definition of that to understand what that is. And then on the following page, there's one called Overall Satisfaction with Wood City Council. I noticed we had a target of 70%, but we only achieved 55%. So therefore, we've dropped our target to 60%, presumably to try and have a target we can actually hit, rather than have a target that we're actually challenged to actually achieve, to actually derive performance improvement. So those are my general comments on the scorecard.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. In respect of the first of those, the 1 star, we engaged with an organisation which produces a scoring system in terms of a whole range of factors affecting an organisation and its internal qualities as well as its work with its customers. And that goes through a set of grades. The one we're in at the moment is a company which is defined as 1 to watch. It then goes on to the next stage, which is 1 star, and then a 2-star organisation and a 3-star organisation. So it's simply a grading system which is applied. So 1 star is definitely beyond 1 to watch. That's progress. Okay. In terms of the overall satisfaction with Worcester City Council, you're quite right, Stephen. We've got to set realistic targets. We've got to targets which people will find challenging and aspirational, rather than ones which we recognise that we're not going to achieve. So we've reset that to 60, as that seems to be something which we could hope to achieve. And I apologise, I've missed the second one. Remind me, what was the second area that you were looking for a definition for?
Yeah, just the traineeships where it says number of days. Is that days per employee per year or average days of training, or what is it?
My apologies, that's an error. It should simply say 7 as the number of trainees. I'm not quite sure why the word days has sneaked into there. So apologies for that. It's just actually 7 traineeships.
Anyone else? In that case, can I ask you to, well, the recommendation is that we consider the proposed content, and we've done that, haven't we? Okay, so
Just take the word days out. and we'll do-
Yes.
Yes.
So we've now got to any other business. Do we have any other business that's? Yes.
Yeah.
So we have a referral report from the Communities Committee, the adoption of the Worcester City Housing Enabling Strategy 2023 to 2026.
I'm happy to present that, Chair.
Thank you very much.
This was a paper which was considered the Communities Committee and unanimously approved there to adopt the strategy. However, it proposed as part of the report that we create a post to help implement that strategy and deliver the action plan. What was noted, an item which was circulated at the committee, was that there are a wide number of affordable housing schemes which are being brought forward at the moment, which amount to, I think, a figure of around 900 over this year and the following 2 years. And so we need to, in line with the strategy, work hard with registered providers across the city area and engage in a number of ways. And it was felt by the committee that it was important to have a dedicated resource to bring that forward. And they agreed the recommendation. However, the value of that over 2 years to be drawn from an appropriate reserve was too great for the committee. So the referral here is simply to agree the release of the reserve, which is a reserve set aside some years ago within the city plan for housing for vulnerable tenants, which was £500,000 at the time. That's still largely intact. I think there's about £400,000 there. So there is sufficient in that reserve to meet this criteria. So the referral is simply to ask committee to agree to the release of that reserve for this purpose. Thank you.
To speak or ask a question?
Steve.
Oh, okay, Steve, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And as Shay mentioned, it was unanimously passed at the Communities Committee, that was the other week. The only question I have in relation to it is a bit of clarity, if you could, please. Paragraph 3.9 says, explains the reason for the utilising the 150,000 to recruit the new post. And what it says is to deliver the strategic goals of the strategy as outlined in strategic goal 2. If we just go back to strategic goal 2, it says, put in place a strategic housing and enabling function that supports the objectives. Put in place a strategic housing and enabling function. Could you explain that, please, and just give a bit of clarity to it?
To come and give extra clarity to it.
Yeah, I think I explained it at committee, and that link may not be entirely accurate. But basically, this new post, as I said at committee last week, fills a bit of a gap for us. So we believe we've not got the sufficient amount of resource, the capacity, and we also believe we're missing some of those sort of next level up strategic skills that we require. To be able to not just work better with RPs on a day-to-day basis, but to sort of undertake that strategic work. So I wouldn't look too sort of narrowly, Steve, at that particular point. It is just about adding some more pace and volume and capacity to an area that I think, you know, the ARC report has made very clear that we've got some under provision in.
Yeah, thank you. I think what I was getting at more than anything else, that this role is there to do the actual job itself and not just give a report about what we need.
The strategy's been written and signed off. We're now in the doing phase.
Doing. So what do I get what do the council get for 150k? So at the end of 2 years, what is this individual being measured on in terms of doing? Is it how many houses are being built or in the pipeline to being built? Or is it they filled a post for 2 years and written lots of report? What is the measurement of success of spending £150,000? If it's just because we need more people in the post, then so be it. But that's not what this is. This is saying there's a delivery. So what's the outcome, please?
Chris, apologies, I've not got the strategy in front of me, but again, when this was debated at committee last week, we now have a number of affordable homes, particularly social rented homes, that we want to deliver over 1, 2, 3 years. So it's very much about ensuring that what we've got committed through planning allocations, that we do everything we possibly can to ensure that we get those numbers, but also that work that we are currently actively doing on those sites that sit outside of the planning regime. It's also about leading on those as well. But in that strategy and the action plan, there are now numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And the sorry, as officers have highlighted, that the report was unanimously accepted, and part of the reasoning behind this was that obviously the officer corps between themselves and members have realised that we haven't got that specialist capacity within our team to be able to deliver what we want, and that's been glaringly obvious for a while. And officers are overworked in certain areas. They've got large portfolios, and this is something that we need urgently addressing. And we've been talking about it for, probably the last decade in terms of that. What it does do is obviously put some pressure on now, right? We agree this tonight, and it goes to full council next week, and we agree it does put pressure on the person that puts in that post to deliver, and we expect results as a result of it. There's no two ways about it. We're not hiding behind that fact. We've committed some money, if the committee's decided to do so, to deliver social affordable housing and some projects. So, we will be expecting some results as a result of this. This is not it's not a decision to buy us time or buy us some more reports. It's a decision to deliver housing, much needed housing on sites that we've got. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
I'm just interested in particularly the references to the SWDP review, and I presume we're already talking to the Wychavon and Malvern Hills. I think when ARC, the draft was first mentioned about a year ago, I said, could we please communicate with the different South Worcestershire councils? And I'm a bit surprised that we're now only meeting with them, whereas actually we should have engaged with them almost from the start.
We speak to Wychavon and Malvern regularly about operational and strategic issues. So we've included ARC liaised with both councils as part of the process. So we have communicated with them, but I think the managing director wants to come in.
April 23. That was what I was meaning. David?
Yes, true.
If I may, just to reiterate Lloyd's point, really, I'm not sure where the clause to which, your paragraph to which you're referring.
Page 30. 4.F, 4.H.
In the actual report itself?
No, the draft.
Oh, the strategy.
Strategy.
All I would say is, again, just reiterating Lloyd's comment. The original SWDP was agreed in 2016, which set out targets for housing development across both Worcester and the district areas and the wider Worcester areas. And since then, and I believe that Lloyd shared some figures at the committee meeting, which set out the number of dwellings that were being built in the neighbouring areas to meet Worcester need. So just really an assurance for members that there is, we're far ahead of simply having a discussion from the previous SWDP to the new SWDP, if you want to call it that. You know, there is ongoing activity between the councils to ensure that houses that are being built in neighbouring districts are going to meet the needs of the city, and there are nomination rights applied to those properties so that they meet the Worcester City affordable housing needs. So just a reassurance really that is an ongoing, yeah.
Perhaps unclear.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Now you're in the hot seat, Lloyd. It was a question really that I wanted to ask about what happens after 2 years with this post, judging by your requirements and needs. What happens after 2 years?
If only we had a crystal ball, isn't it? I probably can't give you a cast iron guarantee of what's going to happen after 2 years, but I think what this post will allow us to do is to see it in action. Hopefully it'll have a really positive outcome. That's what we're hoping, that's what it aims to do. And if it is effective, I'm sure we as a council and you as members will find a way to continue with that level of resource that will continue to help us.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Tom.
Thank you very much, Chair. One of the reasons I was in favour of the strategy and the delivery plan was I noticed that it incorporated elements which are addressing the net zero carbon targets and our environmental sustainability strategy. So I was very pleased that that was taken into account by the consultants. And on that basis, I just express my hope that people employed in the post will continue having that focus. Thank you.
Else wish to speak? In that case, can we approve the allocation of £150,000 to be met from the Housing for Vulnerable Tenants Reserve to recruit a Principal Strategic Housing and Enabling Officer to a 2-year fixed term post?
That's carried, Chair.
Is there any other business? In that case, we need to move on to part 2.
Yes, Chair. You need to exclude the press and public.
Sorry?
You can ask members to agree to exclude the press and public.
Yeah, do we all agree